Welcome to the Ecommerce Marketing Podcast, the highly rated digital marketing podcast that provides weekly digital marketing tips and strategies from some of the world's top digital marketers and e-commerce entrepreneurs that will help you take your digital marketing to the next level. Sit back and enjoy this power-packed episode hosted by Arlen Robinson, who is an e-commerce entrepreneur and digital marketing expert with over 20 years of experience. Hey, e-commerce marketing podcast listener. Are you looking to increase traffic and sales to your website? You can do this by launching your own affiliate program. Just visit getosi.com and sign up for a free trial today. That's getosi.com. Now get ready to hear from your e-commerce marketing expert of the week as they drill down to give you details on marketing strategies that can help grow your business.
Welcome back to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast, everyone. My name is Arlen and I am your host. And today we have a very special guest, Radhika Duggal, who has over 20 years of brand and growth marketing experience across management, consulting startups, and Fortune 100 companies. She's a C-level marketer, transformational leader, and builder of high-performing teams. She's currently serving as the Chief Marketing Officer at Super.com, which is a technology company that provides innovative solutions for consumers and businesses. Additionally, she shares her knowledge and passion for marketing as an adjunct professor of consumer behavior at NYU Stern School of Business. Welcome to the podcast, Radhika.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, no, thank you for joining me. Really excited to talk to you today. I think we've kind of got a hot topic in terms of marketing. I kind of say it's almost a bedrock of marketing and certain things that almost a business can't do without if you don't have these proper things in place, which is really understanding and adopting design goals and personas, the customer personas, and how you carry all that out through your different marketing channels and vehicles and back to their website. All of those things I think are critical these days.
I 100% agree with you. And in fact, I'm so passionate about understanding consumer behavior because I really believe that the foundation of any business is understanding a consumer's unmet needs, figuring out how to grow and build a product or a service that meets those needs, and then marketing the hell out of that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the bottom line. But before we dig deep into that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and specifically how you got into what you're doing today?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So from a professional career perspective, you walked through my background beautifully. So as you mentioned, I've spent the last 20 years working in 3 different kinds of marketing functions, for lack of a better way of putting it. Number one, I spent about a third of my career as a management consultant, going from, call it Fortune 500 company to Fortune 500 company, helping them understand at that time, what do you do that newfangled thing called digital marketing? Or how do I build an analytics organization to enable me to measure that digital marketing thing? Or how do I build a brand from the ground up? Following that time period, I split my time between startups and Fortune 100 companies, JP Morgan Chase and Pfizer. And what I've really had the opportunity to do in each of those different types of settings is actually do many of the different functions, both as an individual contributor and as a team leader of marketing. So I've gotten the opportunity to work as a brand marketer. I've had the opportunity to drive revenue and drive consumer acquisition. I've had the opportunity to work as a PR and communications professional. And I've very purposefully done that because the facets that make up marketing are very disparate. And I feel very strongly that one can't be a well-rounded leader without understanding the types of guidance that they're giving their team. And some of that starts with that foundational knowledge of how do you do that job to begin with. So I've tried to have that disparate marketing career. And you asked very specifically, well, why, how did you find yourself in your current role? Yeah. Well, I found that as I've become a parent, my personal life and experiences have impacted every facet of my life, and my job and my career is no exception. So Super.com is a fintech and e-commerce company focused on helping consumers earn money, build credit, and save money. And I got to tell you, I remember seeing firsthand unequal access to credit, unequal access to income, and how that impacts families and communities. And that is exactly the problem I joined super.com to help to solve, which is essentially focused on helping people kind of get access to the things that you get when you start from equal footing, to help them earn money, save money, and build credit.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that's definitely an honorable mission, earning money, building credit, and making sure your whole financial picture or financial persona is intact is really important these days. I mean, if all of that is not in place, I mean, there's so many things you can't do. You can't buy a house if that's not in place. You can't finance a car, you name it, the list goes on and on. And then a lot of times I know people that are in those types of situations almost can feel like you're almost kind of an outsider to society because you can't do those things. So yeah, it's good to know that there's companies and brands such as yourself that are kind of have that mission to kind of even the playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, it's actually incredible when you think about the volume of consumers who feel that. So when we think of our target customer, we're thinking of the average everyday American. And a statistic we may not just travel around with every day is the idea that the median income in the U.S. is roughly a little less than $75,000. Pre-pandemic, it was $68,000. That's not as high as one might think, especially if you live like I do in Manhattan or like others might in San Francisco, right? All of the tech companies trying to solve all of these big problems. We don't as often, and not everyone, and not always, but we don't as often come face to face with some of the consumers we're trying to help.
Yeah, that's so true.
To know how large of a group that is and how meaningful that work is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I can definitely agree. I mean, you hear those numbers, the median income 75,000, and you're like, oh, it's a good amount. But yeah, certain areas of the country, it doesn't go a long way. I'm in Florida, I'm in Orlando area, and historically Orlando has been pretty affordable. But our home values are shooting up. Everything is shooting up, and so even in places that have historically had where inflation wasn't as high and the cost of living wasn't as high, it's creeping up all over.
Yeah, and that's the household income. So if you think about a household with 2, 3, 4 people in it, not a lot to go around for a lot of people.
Nah, it really isn't. Yeah. Well, now speaking of, we talked a little bit about our discussion. We're going to be talking about kind of understanding consumer behavior. I wanted to see where we start off with. I wanted to see, how do you feel consumer behavior and understanding consumer behavior, how has that evolved over the past, let's say, 20 years?
It's such an interesting question because in some ways, consumer behavior has not evolved. In some ways, it has. And as a professor, one of the biggest challenges I face every year when I teach my class is, geez, how do I make this thing where some of the theories are from 1960s still relevant today, where you think that the context and the culture and that we all live in has changed. So look, a lot of consumer behavior hasn't. Needs are still needs. Personality is still personality. Perception is still perception. And the psychological frameworks that underlie how we think about all of those things and how marketers interpret those things to understand consumer behavior, that's all the same. Yes, things change around the margins, but the theory and the psychology, a lot of it still stands. But what has changed tremendously is, number one, the context of the world that consumers make decisions in and the types of consumption decisions we as consumers are evaluating and making. So here are a couple of examples to make what is a very high level theoretical discipline a little bit more concrete. So the first, think about how we as marketers might understand consumers. Our methodology for gathering information on consumers has changed dramatically. So as a marketer, I now have access to more robust data sources, real-time information. As businesses, because of that, we can make more well-informed decisions. We can connect with consumers in a much more targeted way. There's a double-edged sword of that on the privacy side, but my ability to gather information about my consumers is still the same. And then I can use those age-old consumer behavior theories and psychological philosophies to better understand the consumer and make better marketing decisions. Another example of something that, frankly, is quite different is the context in which our consumers operate. So if you just think about COVID and the pandemic, there's a huge societal change in consumer behavior. And some of what has emerged from COVID in a post-pandemic world has changed consumer behavior, some for the better, some for the less positive. And so while the underlying principles of personality and needs hasn't changed, the outcome of a consumer's decision in a post-pandemic world might be really different. And an example of that is consumer spending on experiences. So a McKinsey study from this year essentially said that out-of-home entertainment, so entertainment outside of your house in a post-pandemic world, it's grown 7% year over year in real dollars. 7% growth. And if you think about that, it's also amongst consumers of all income levels. Well, there's inflation happening. We're talking about the prices of everything going up. We're talking about the fact that consumer debt has reached an all-time high in the US, and yet spending on experiences is still continuing to rise. Why is that? Because something has materially changed in the context of the world the consumer lives in. Their needs are different, and so they make different spending decisions. So as a marketer, really understanding not only the consumer as an individual, but the context of the environment that they live in becomes so incredibly critical.
Yeah. Very, very true. Yeah. That just really comes down to, really identifying your ideal customer persona. And that goes down to where are they living? What types of things are they familiar with? Are they comfortable with? Are they used to in their certain locale or their region? And so the good thing is these days, all of this data and information is readily available, which, I'm sure, you mentioned textbooks that you use in your class from the 60s. Back then, they had data, but nowhere near the amount of data that we have now. And so it does give brands the ability to truly make informed marketing decisions where they're trying to target those right customers.
Yeah, and that psychological theory from the 60s, that remains.
Yeah.
But the examples of how you might teach someone the context that a consumer lives in, that changes so frequently.
Hey, listen up. If you enjoy all the marketing techie things and strategies that we talk about here on this show, and you like to earn extra income, 5 to 10K months, working flexible hours, then you need to meet my friend Emily Reagan. She's a mentor to freelance marketers and marketing assistants, and she can help you monetize your skills into a profitable, in-demand marketing service business. Check out her podcast, Unicorns Unite, where she nerds out on the client side and how-tos of marketing services like affiliate management, copywriting, landing page design, automations, email, social, and more. Listen on this podcast app or visit unicornsunitepodcast.com. The cool thing is, marketing services are value-based and in demand. You've already got a head start by listening here. So you're sitting on a gold mine. Add Emily Reagan's Unicorns Unite to your podcast player now and cash in. Now back to our show. Yeah, very true. Now, speaking of personas, because that's kind of the heart of this, what research methods have you seen that work best for developing user personas? What you guys do at super.com?
Yeah, so I'll say at super.com, especially for a startup of our size, we punch way above our weight on the research side. And we've used a fairly data-driven process to develop these personas. So first and foremost, we developed a design target. We used qualitative and quantitative market research to say, okay, of our hypothesis for who the design target was, which at the time was sort of a $75,000 household income or less, who among that group is truly really going to be attracted to our product and services. We did quant research, we did qual research, we mapped out demographically, behaviorally, and psychographically, who are these people? And we really wanted to understand what are their needs, what are their values. And once we understood that, we sized the market. We said, that's of our design target, which became a smaller group than the overall survey, the group that we surveyed. We did a segmentation study. We did a segmentation study that essentially looked at the traits, the needs, and the attributes of folks, but we focused on essentially defining 5 subsegments within that design target that was focused on understanding the value our product created for those folks. So subsegment 1 found X, Y, or Z value in the product. Subsegment 2 found a different value. And we also wanted to look at, because super.com is a company that offers multiple products and services, how do we choose the subsegment to focus on where more of or most of our products meet the needs of the subsegment, where we have room to grow as a business as well, right? Because we don't want to saturate the subsegment and then there's nobody left. And what's interesting is we came away from that study with these 5 subsegments and we said, well, there's one where the consumers find most of our products appealing. We have a ton of room to grow still. So we're really focused on that one subsegment. And then from there, what we did is we took that subsegment and really brought it to life with various personas. And those personas are folks, examples of folks who might be part of that subsegment. They have a name. There's a description of where they live, how they behave, how they feel, how our products impact their life. And importantly, again, the context of their life. Because, right or wrong, consumers first of all, they don't make rational decisions and they don't make decisions in a vacuum. We all make decisions in the context of all of the things going on in our lives. And it's really important as you create personas to be able to bring that to life for your team. Otherwise, it's just a flat piece of paper with a picture of a person with a name. It's really about the context and the life that they live and how that impacts their purchase decision that you want to be able to share.
Yeah, very true. Now, you mentioned when you guys are going through your process where you're getting a lot of this data and you've been doing a great job with the research portion of it. And you talked about quantitative data and qualitative data, the amount of data versus the quality. How do you really know what's best? How do you kind of balance these different data sets when you're trying to create the persona?
Yeah, I'll say actually there's the 3 different data sets are really critical. One is the quant data, which is typically a study that is comprised of existing users as well as external users that are in your design target or in your subsegment. 2, to your point, is the qual data. And 3 is actually the data that you have internally, whether it's transaction data, purchase data of some kind. And making sure you use all 3 to really understand your persona is critical. But first and foremost, that statistically significant quantitative data is really important to understand trends. What do people value? What are their unmet needs? What is their demographic profile? And making sure you have a large enough sample size to get that statistically significant read with 90%, 95% confidence is incredibly important. Then layering on the qualitative data is important. And for the qualitative data, it helps you understand the why behind certain trends. Why is something important? Why is that need unmet? Or the emotion and the feeling behind it. What is the emotional toll of having this unmet need? What does it really feel like to be denied access to credit from a bank? What impact can super.com or another company create by solving that problem? What is that moment of joy or that moment of relief or that moment of some feeling that we can create with our product? So the qualitative data is really helpful for understanding the feelings, whereas the quantitative data and the purchase data is really important in understanding overall trends.
Yeah, right. That's very true. Now, because like you said, we're at a point where we've got all of this data, we can make all these fast decisions. A lot of times brands, because we're getting such a kind of a glut of this data in such a quick amount of time, you can adapt to the changing trends a lot quicker than you could in the past. And so you may see over time that your ideal customer persona maybe has changed a little bit. And that can be based on, your sales, the areas you're getting your sales, and then just all this information that you're getting based on the sales that you're getting. If you need to roll out a new persona based on this data, how do you effectively train your teams around these new personas, especially if you've got a really large organization?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And it goes back to what problem are you solving? So whether it's a new persona that you might want to roll out or the existence of personas in general, I think those are actually 2 really different and interesting problems to tackle. When you think about how do you train a company to use personas in general, I've had the benefit of doing this in small companies and in kind of medium or larger size companies. In a big company or a large company, the problem you're solving is very different. In a large company, it's generally accepted that the company serves 1 or more personas or 1 or more design targets or subsegments. And there, the employees know it's really critical to understand who are we serving, what are their needs and values, how do they interact with our product. And they know because it's generally accepted practice. Personas
Mhm.
ebb and flow and change and modify over time. So the problem you're solving is less about convincing folks that this is important and more about doing the research, the market research, getting the existing customer data, doing the user research, documenting the persona, updating it, and then importantly, socializing it over time. So making sure it's in all of the right meetings, making sure, if you're in person, you got the printout of the persona on every person's desk in the office and people really understand who you're targeting. In
Mhm.
a smaller company, the problem is actually really different. So my experience has been in a smaller company, especially if it's before the company has hit the growth stage or before they found product market fit, it's actually about remembering that personas and targeting a specific type of customer is the foundation of the business. Because if it's before you found product market fit, unless you have real conviction in it, you sort of don't know which channels work. And so the way you solve it is, again, ensuring that that smaller company has the ability to do that data-driven, quantitative and qualitative research. Those aren't skills that every startup has or needs.
Mhm.
Creating those artifacts, creating the document that details the design target, doing the segmentation study, which is a rather complex
Yeah.
quantitative study, creating the personas, and then again, sharing them in every single meeting possible so that people really understand what it is you're doing and importantly how and why it's supposed to be used. I
Yeah.
find that at a larger company the how and why makes a ton of sense and is well ingrained in the culture. At a smaller company, that's actually the problem you're solving and the work to be done.
Yeah. I definitely hear that. I can see for a large organization, just the process of really kind of disseminating that information to your teams, the training behind it, especially if they're already accustomed to kind of, I guess you could say, selling a certain way to a certain type of customer. Yeah, it seems like you can't really just throw a new persona on them and tell them, all right, this is a new type of customer. You're going to have to switch the way you're selling. It seems like there has to be a fair amount of, I guess you could say, formal or even semi-formal training that goes behind that. If
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think
mistaken.
it's just about education, right? In any
Okay.
scenario, it's about helping people understand why and the
Yeah.
impact that a switch like that can make.
Hmm.
Switching anything on people, right? If you think about what change management is,
Yeah.
switching anything on anyone is hard, and oftentimes it takes multiple times to communicate that. But I think instead of just communicating the what you're doing, communicating why and how oftentimes ends up being so much more impactful.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, as we prepare to wrap things up, I wanted to see, how would you say you would turn a user persona into an effective marketing strategy, and if there's any specific success story that you can share, either with your dealings at super.com or with any of the companies that you've been with.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about super.com particularly because one of the best examples of this is the recent rename and rebrand we did. So as recently as last year, we were a company that operated under several different names. We were Snap Travel, Snap Commerce, Daily Steals. We are essentially a family of brands that operated a bit disparately. We had a different verbal and visual identity for each brand. And October of last year, we renamed and rebranded under the super.com sort of brand name with a new verbal and visual identity. And we did that, again, based on a really clear understanding of who our customer was. And how did we get there? Well, we identified that customer, the same process we talked about before. Really quantitative research and qualitative research, as well as existing customer data. We looked at that quant data and the existing customer data to understand the trends in consumer behavior and understand demographically who these customers are and behaviorally, what do they do? And then we tried to understand the feeling and the emotion through the qual. We developed the company positioning, right? Like, what does the company do? What does the company stand for? What is the messaging based on that data, and develop the name based on that data, as well as a number of different rounds of quantitative market research to really test the name.
Right.
What do people feel or see when they think about one name versus another? Does it have high appeal? Does it have high polarity? And then once we had chosen a name, we developed, what do we look like and what do we sound like? A verbal and visual identity. We bought the URL super.com and here we are. And I'll say that we're at the beginning of our journey. We know who our customer is. We know who our persona is. but we've got a long way to go from both the
Hmm.
product side and the marketing side to continue to serve that customer. I'm so proud of the headway that we've made so far, but we're excited to continue to use marketing and continue to use data-driven product experimentation to better serve that customer.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good to hear. And you mentioned a couple key things that I'm glad you said. Even for large organizations such as yours, super.com, it's you even though you've done all of the work, you've done the research, you guys did the rebranding, you've established these personas, they're not set in stone, and you guys are always just constantly looking at how to tweak it. Is the persona changing in any way? Are there certain demographics that we need to kind of orientate our marketing towards and our messaging? And so all of that it seems like it always just has to be a constant iterative process. We're always looking at it and making changes to it. And then I guess at the same time, because these things aren't set in stone, having some type of system in place where you're informing your team of these changes, because it's good to of course be on the top of these changes and make these changes, but then you have to of course inform your team. And so it seems like you do have to have a pretty smooth process in place in order for everyone to kind of keep up with all of these shifts.
Yeah, we do a number of very intentional things to make sure everyone can keep up with those shifts. So
Okay.
number one, we have what we call a mission aligned team, and it's a cross-functional team of marketing, product, and operations. And this group of folks is responsible for making sure that we understand who is the design target and therefore the persona, not only for super.com as a whole, but for each of our products. So that this quarter, that team is actually looking at one of our newest products, Super Plus, which is a subscription product that gets you access to a number of earnings and savings and credit building opportunities. And they're pulling the data, they're looking at who the existing customer is and saying, okay, who's really the persona for Super Plus? Is it different from the rest of the company?
Mhm.
Would we modify or change that? And that work is incredibly critical. That team is also responsible for planning, a whole company, what we call dog fooding exercise, where essentially we either deep dive and try to understand the context of the consumer's life of that persona. So what is it like to be someone who is a parent in a household with income of $50,000 and no credit score? What is it like to not have access to traditional banking services? What is it like to buy your groceries in cash? Whatever the challenges that customer might feel. Or the other part of dog fooding, which we also do as a whole company, is think about, what is it like to use our products? When they're positive and they help you save money, like what is the emotion that feels like? And when you have a negative experience, which you do with every product sometimes in every company, what does that feel like? And having this group whose job it is to really understand the end-to-end customer experience, make sure we all as a company understand what our customers' lives are like, I think is just invaluable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really true. And it's something that I think not a lot of brands do well in really truly understanding, kind of putting themselves in the shoes of that customer. When it comes down to it, you really can't service them correctly unless you do. I think it's just something you have to do.
And it
Of course,
just takes time. Like that's
yeah,
the challenge.
exactly. That's what I was about to say. It takes time, takes effort, takes resources,
That's right.
money. But yeah, I think if it's done right, you can definitely be successful. Well, Radhika, this was an awesome conversation. I've learned a ton, and I know our listeners and viewers have as well. But we always like to shift gears, just so our audience and viewers can get to know you a little bit better. If you don't mind sharing one closing fun fact about yourself that you think we'd be interested to know.
Yeah, I'd say closing fun fact, I sort of started with it too. I started by saying how I grew up influenced, and the people I was around as a child influenced where I choose to work today. And now I'm the parent of a toddler. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that she's going to grow up and is growing up in a place that is diametrically opposite to the place I grew up in, the circumstances in which I grew up in. And I think, something that I've learned as a marketer who cares about the consumer is finding work where you feel passionately about solving the problem because of something that is personal to you has helped make work feel like less of a job and more of a mission. And
Okay.
I'd give that advice to anybody who asks, that if you can find the mission that you're passionate about,
Yeah.
spending, 10, 12 more hours a day do that. Don't do the
Yeah.
job.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very well said. I think that's something that can carry people a long way because, like you said, if it's more of a mission and what you're doing is there's a mission that you're passionate behind or about, then yeah, it's like it doesn't seem like work. It's of course, so the responsibilities, there's time, there's effort. I'm sure there's always times where, there's frustration, you get tired, but that comes with anything. But I
I
think
think it's more that.
yeah, exactly.
If a
Exactly.
job is a job, fine. But like, if you feel that you're solving a real problem that you care about,
Yep.
you'll have more resilience in doing it, because building any business in a massive company like JP Morgan Chase
Hmm.
or in a smaller company like super.com, it's hard.
Yeah.
And if you feel connected to it, it'll get you through the harder times.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Very, very well said. Well, thank you for sharing that. We really
Of course.
appreciate that. Lastly, before we do let you go, why don't you let us know how our listeners and viewers can reach out to you, contact you, and pick your brain anymore about customer personas, customer behavior, and how do they craft a proper one for their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm relatively fast in responding and excited to hear from folks.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely have that info and the link for your company's website in our show notes so people can check you guys out, see what you can do, and if you can help them out as well. And we really appreciate having you on the E-commerce Marketing Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the E-commerce Marketing Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Are you looking to take your digital marketing to the next level but are tired of weeding through countless YouTube videos with unproven and untrusted marketing strategies? Well, we have the answer for you. The More Sales Every Month online digital marketing course. In this information-packed course, you will learn effective keyword research, link building, content marketing, and much more to attract and convert your site visitors into paying customers. Just go to moresaleseverymonth.com and sign up today for a low one-time fee. In addition to this power-packed course, if you would like to get access to a growing repository of digital marketing articles, PDFs, and ebooks, check out getosi.com/resources and opt in to get full access to our library of priceless marketing information to help you take your digital marketing to the next level.